We use it every single day, but have you ever stopped to ask what money really is? Today, we're going to take a whirlwind tour through one of the most important inventions in human history. And you might think you know the story, but it's not really about gold or paper. It's about the evolution of one single powerful idea.
So let's just start there. What is it? Is it the cash in your pocket? The numbers you see on your banking app? Well, the real answer is way more interesting than that, and it has almost nothing to do with the actual object itself.
Because here's the secret. Money isn't really a thing. It's a technology. A social technology. And it's built on a foundation that's both incredibly powerful and, honestly, pretty fragile. Plain old trust. It's just a shared story we all agree on so that we can cooperate. And how we define that trust? Well, that has changed in some absolutely massive ways over the centuries.
Okay, let's dive in. To really understand money, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, to a world that didn't have it and to the huge problem it was invented to solve. Just imagine for a second that you're a chicken farmer, and what you really need is a new pair of shoes. In a world of pure barter, you can't just find any shoemaker. No, you have to find a shoemaker who just so happens to be craving chickens right at that very moment. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants, and it is just incredibly inefficient. It basically puts a hard ceiling on how big or complex an economy can ever get. So the first solutions were pretty clever. People started using objects that pretty much everyone agreed had some kind of value, what we call commodity money. We're talking about things like salt, which, fun fact, is where the word salary comes from, or even cattle. But the real game changer, that came around 600 BC over in Lydia, which is in modern-day Turkey. They started minting the very first coins. And here's the absolutely crucial part. The king, the state, stamped them. All of a sudden, you didn't have to trust the chunk of metal itself. You just had to trust the authority that guaranteed it was what it said it was. That stamp changed everything.
Now, this coin system worked great for a long time, but it had a very heavy problem. Trying to do big business by lugging around chests full of gold is not only a pain, it's also super risky. As global trade got bigger, the world needed a lighter, faster solution. And that solution, of course, was paper. It actually started way back in Tang Dynasty China, where merchants used these deposit receipts they called flying money so they wouldn't have to ship heavy coins all over the place. Centuries later in London, goldsmiths started issuing paper receipts for the gold people stored with them. And pretty soon, people weren't trading the gold anymore, they were just trading the paper receipts. The promise written on the paper became just as good as the gold itself.
And this is where the story takes a really wild turn. See, those goldsmiths started noticing something pretty obvious. Most people just left their gold sitting in the vaults. They almost never came to get it all at once. This sparked a revolutionary idea. What if we lend out more receipts than the actual gold we're holding? This was the birth of fractional reserve banking. And think about what that means for trust. It's no longer a one-to-one promise for a physical thing. Now, your trust is in the system, in the bank's ability to have enough cash on hand when you come knocking. Okay, let's jump forward to the 20th century, because it turns out that tying your entire global economy to a shiny physical metal that's hard to find, well, that eventually creates its own set of massive problems. For a huge chunk of modern history, the world ran on something called the gold standard. It was simple. Your country's money was a direct claim on a fixed amount of gold. Then, after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement basically put the US dollar at the very center of the whole system. The dollar was backed by gold, and every other important currency was backed by the dollar. It was the anchor for the whole world. But then came one specific fateful year, 1971. In a move that sent shockwaves across the entire planet, President Richard Nixon slammed shut what was known as the gold window. He announced that other countries could no longer show up and trade their US dollars for America's gold. Just like that, in a single night, the anchor that had tied global money to a physical thing for centuries was cut.
And with that one move, we all walked into the modern era of pure fiat money. Fiat is a Latin word that just means let it be done. It means our money has value today simply because the government says it does. Full stop. The object of our trust shifted again. It wasn't in metal anymore. It was placed entirely in the full faith and credit of the government itself.
And that brings us, finally, to right now. Today, money isn't really metal or paper anymore. For most of us, it's just digital information, ones and zeros flying around the world. And this total dematerialization has created a brand new 21st century problem, the problem of control. And this slide just lays out the fundamental battle for the future of money perfectly. On one side, you've got the traditional system we all grew up with. It's centralized, issued by governments, and it runs on our trust in big institutions like banks. But on the other side, you've got this radical new model kicked off by cryptocurrency that's completely decentralized. It asks you to trust something totally different, not a powerful institution, but open source computer code and pure mathematics. So think about what's happening. Bitcoin explodes onto the scene in 2009, right out of the wreckage of the financial crisis, with the stated goal of getting rid of the banks. At the exact same time, physical cash is starting to disappear, and now governments around the world are rushing to create their own digital currencies, so-called CBDCs. And these represent the total opposite idea, the ultimate form of centralized government-controlled digital money. So this all leaves us with a really critical question for our future. We've watched the very nature of trust evolve, from trusting a physical thing, to trusting a government stamp, to trusting a bank's ledger. Now it's shifting again, to trust in computer code. So in this next chapter, as money becomes nothing more than pure information, we have to ask ourselves, who or what are we really trusting, and who is really in control?